Hello and welcome back to Dr. Logic Awkwardly Does Logic. Actually, in this case, we're going to do a tiny little bit of metaphysics, and I apologize for that. Sorry. Awkward cat. Last video, I said that predicate logic is about objects and properties, and so I have to say a little bit about what is a property. So, metaphysicians proper will actually give you many different answers to this question, and for the most part, we're not going to be interested in any of those. So, thank goodness, not too much metaphysics invading our logic here. For our purposes, what we are interested in is anything that can be used to describe an individual object or a group of objects. So the simplest type of properties are the sorts of things that we saw as terms in our predicate language. So things expressed in English with simple nouns, adjectives, verbal phrases, so things like is a chair, is red, is running, is a cat, is very cute, is wagging its tail, and all sorts of things like this. But English can also express much more complex properties that don't involve just a single object. So you can have relations between objects. For instance, something is petting something else. Something is sitting on something's lap. So that would be, both of those are examples of binary relations, much more interesting binary relations than the usual ones that you get, like is married to, is the father of, is the child of, etc. And then if you've got a relationship that brings together three different objects, you have a ternary relationship. So this would be like the between relationship. X is between Y and Z, involves three objects. You've got other kind of relations that you can express. Some are more natural, some are less natural, but this is kind of the sort of the general sort of distinction that we want to make is between things which are relating objects together and things which are describing individual objects. So all of these are properties of things, but what we will say is we'll say that the ones that are just kind of like describing one object, we'll call those predicates, and the other ones we will call relations. Now, strictly speaking, you can say, well, but they're just all predicates because you're kind of talking about predicating some relation of multiple objects. But when we come to define our language formally, it will be useful to have this distinction, just to be able to talk about, if I say predicate, you know I'm talking about something that applies to one object. If I say relation, we have something that applies to more. Now, that is how to talk about and start thinking about properties. The other component of predicate logic are the objects. And we will have kind of different ways that we can name objects. We can talk about objects generally, so just X's and Y's and kind of things. Or we can talk about, we can name specific objects. We can do this by uniquely describing it, saying, you know, the smallest prime number that is not divisible by 2. That would be 3. Or we can say things like Bob, Socrates, Goldie. We can give things proper names. So that will kind of constantly pick out one object out of all of the objects we're talking about. But there's another way that we can do it, which is via functions. So a function is something where kind of I give you a description and an object, and then you give me back the thing that fits that description. So the parent of Sarah is a function that actually returns two people, so Scott and Carolyn. Child of Sarah is a function that returns my daughter. Sometimes functions are easier to think of with mathematical examples, so you can talk about like what is the number that comes after 5. So I don't have to ever name 6. I could do all of the math that I wanted just by saying the number that comes after 5. Now, of course, this is tedious and very verbose, so we wouldn't normally do this. But the whole point is, we could. So, couple different ways to talk about properties, couple different ways to talk about objects, and in the next video, I will make this more explicit by actually defining a language for you so that you can see how all of these things can be represented. All right. I'll see you then. Cheers.